accepted him as a real Brahmana. Advaita Prabhu asserted that by offering the first dish to Haridas Thakura, he was getting the result of feeding 100,000 Brahmanas. The conclusion is that if one can feed a Brahmana or Vaishnava, it is better than performing hundreds of thousands of sacrifices. In this age, therefore, it is recommended that Harir Nama, chanting the holy name of God and pleasing a Vaishnava, are the only means to elevate oneself to spiritual life. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this verse, let me just read it again because it's very nice. It says, I do not enjoy the oblations offered by the sacrificers in the sacrificial fire, which is one of my own mouths, with the same relish as I do the delicacies overflowing with ghee, which are offered to the mouths of the Brahmanas who have dedicated to me the results of their activities and who are ever satisfied with my prasada. Okay, so this is a very significant verse in the sense that it shows how much respect there should be given to a genuine Brahmanas. Genuine Brahmanas are the ones that actually follow the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. It's not that they're born Brahmana, therefore they're a Brahmana. Yeah, they're born, someone might be born in a Brahmana family, but if he doesn't follow all the rules and regulations of spiritual life, he's not really a Brahmana. However, if someone does follow all the rules and regulations of spiritual life, even though they're not born in a Brahmana family, they can become a bona fide Brahmana also. Brahmana is not by birth, Brahmana is by qualities, the qualities that they manifest. Therefore, Haridas Thakur is being shown full respect of a genuine Brahmana by Advaita Prabhu, who is a direct expansion of Krishna. So, although the smart Brahmins and others might not accept Haridas, might not have accepted Haridas because he was born in a Muslim family, and obviously, Muslims are meat eaters and so forth. But Haridas himself was a pure devotee. But not everyone can recognize who is a pure devotee. We can see there often some confusion sometimes, but who is actually a pure devotee? I remember one time in France, we were having a festival, and there was so we were sitting down to have prasadam, and there was a plate going around. Everyone was sitting down, and there's a plate coming slowly from one person to the next person, the next person. And someone sort of gave me a little nudge with their an elbow and said, "Here, this is prasadam from a pure devotee." I said, "Okay." I took it and had a little bit, and I gave it to the next person. And then a little bit later, there was another plate coming around, and then again I got a nudge like this in my ribs, And the devotee next to me said, "Here, this is the second pure devotee prasadam." So I said, "Okay." So I took a little bit, I gave it to the next person. And then another plate was coming around, again I got a nudge in my ribs, and the person said, "Here, this is the third pure devotee prasadam." I said, "Oh, okay." So I took a little bit, and then I nudged the other guy, and that was always nudging me like this. And I said, "Hey, here, there's some prasadam from me also." So who is actually a pure devotee? That's a good question to ask. It's someone who is actually following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. It's not that they have, a name or they're being identified, by a name. They have to be identified by their qualifications. Name doesn't really mean that much. What is important? It's just like, if someone names their child a blind child, beautiful eyed.
Yeah, lion.
Huh?
There's a popular name in North India. It's lion soup.
Okay.
Yeah, the beautiful eye.
Sulochana, yeah. So naming a child who's blind, Sulochana doesn't really make any sense. But the same way, we shouldn't look at, let's say, names. We should look at qualities of a person. That's what's going to really define who that person is. Okay, so the first qualification is the devotee of the Lord or the Vaishnava does not take anything without offering it to the Lord. Since a Vaishnava dedicates all the results of his activities to the Lord, he does not taste anything eatable with which is not first offered to him. The Lord also relishes giving to the Vaishnava's mouth all eatables offered to him. It is clear from this verse that the Lord eats through the sacrificial fire and the Brahmana's mouth. So many articles, grains, ghee, etc., are offered and sacrificed for the satisfaction of the Lord. The Lord accepts sacrificial offerings from the Brahmanas and devotees, and elsewhere it is stated that whatever is given for the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas to eat is also accepted by the Lord. But here it is said that he accepts offerings to the mouths of the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas with even greater relish. The best example of this is found in the life of Advaita Prabhu in his dealings with Haridasa Thakur. Even though Haridasa was born of a Mohammedan family, Advaita Prabhu offered him the first dish of prasada after the performance of a sacred fire ceremony. Haridasa Thakur informed him that he was born of a Mohammedan family and asked why Advaita Prabhu was offering the first dish to a Mohammedan instead of an elevated Brahmana. Out of his humbleness, Haridasa condemned himself a Mohammedan. But Advaita Prabhu, being an experienced devotee, accepted him as a real Brahmana. Advaita Prabhu asserted that by offering the first dish to Haridas Thakur, he was getting the result of feeding 100,000 Brahmanas. The conclusion is that if one can feed a Brahmana or Vaishnava, it is better than performing hundreds of thousands of sacrifices. In this age, therefore, it is recommended that Harir Nama, chanting the holy name of God and pleasing the Vaishnavas, are the only means to elevate oneself to spiritual life. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That is just a very nice purport. It shows how important it is to recognize a genuine Vaishnava. Now, how was Haridas Thakur, who was born in a Brahmana, Mohammedan family, how come he was identified as a pure devotee? Well, because he was always chanting Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. And not only he was chanting Hare Krishna, but he was also following the regulative principles of devotional service. So therefore, by these two criteria, you can recognize who is a pure devotee. Their always chanting Hare Krishna, and is always following the regulative principles of Krishna consciousness. Then you can say this is a devotee, and if they're doing it uh, day after day, year after year, you can assume that they're actually a pure devotee because they're not, off and on chanting or off and on this or that. That's every day. That's their life. Is chanting and dancing, taking prasadam and distributing prasadam and giving classes and hearing classes like that. Then the person can be understood as a genuine, pure devotee. Okay, so Haridas Thakur is very, very humble, and he says to Advaitacharya, how come you're giving me the first dish of prasadam after the performance of a sacred fire ceremony? And he said, I'm born in a Mohammedan family, and so how come you're offering to me instead of offering first to elevated brahmanas? So Haridas was very, what you would call, humble, and but Advaita, being an experienced devotee, accepted him as a real brahmana. So that means there are people who are brahmana only in name, but not in uh, their actions. And the action of real brahmana is they're always engaged in offering sacrifices to the Lord and preaching about the glories of the Lord and always distributing prasadam and accepting prasadam. Dadati pratigrinanti guyam akyati prichyate punkte bo jayate jaiva sadvita pratilakshanam. They're engaged in 6 types of activities: uh, hearing and sharing endearing thoughts about the Lord, giving and receiving prasadam, and giving and receiving gifts. There's a 6 types of ways of showing love between devotees. So, what is the temple for? The temple is to glorify the Lord and to also engage in those 6 types of reciprocal, uh, let's say, sharing with the other devotees. So that way, devotees give and receive prasadam, they give and receive gifts, and they give and receive endearing thoughts about Krishna and Krishna consciousness. Okay, so when a brahmana is fed, uh, it says that the Lord accepts sacrificial offerings from the brahmanas and the devotees. And elsewhere, it is stated that whatever is given for the brahmanas and Vaishnavas to eat is also accepted by the Lord. So that's why it's traditional that, especially householders, they'll invite a genuine brahmana to their house to have prasadam, knowing that when the brahmana eats the prasadam, Krishna is very pleased. And as it says here, that whatever is given for the brahmanas and Vaishnavas to eat is also accepted by the Lord. So when the brahmana eats something, it is equal to the Lord eating it. It's the same as the Lord eating prasadam. So whatever is given for the brahmanas and Vaishnavas to eat is also accepted by the Lord. But here it is said that he, meaning the Lord, accepts offerings to the mouths of brahmanas and Vaishnavas with even greater relish. The best example of this. So Haridas Thakur was actually, although born in a Mohammedan family, he was greater than uh, people that are born in Brahmana families, because uh, He was completely surrendered to chanting the holy names of the Lord. Even though Haridas was born of a Mohammedan family, Advaita Prabhu offered him the first dish of prasada after the performance of a sacred fire ceremony. Haridas Thakur informed Advaita that he was born of a Mohammedan family and asked why Advaita Prabhu was offering the first dish to a Mohammedan instead of an elevated Brahmana. Out of his humbleness, Haridas condemned himself a Mohammedan, but Advaita Prabhu, being an experienced devotee, accepted him as a real Brahmana. Advaita Prabhu asserted that by offering the first dish to Haridas Thakur, he was getting the result of feeding 100,000 Brahmanas. The conclusion is that if one can feed a Brahmana or Vaishnava, it is better than performing hundreds of thousands of sacrifices. In this age, therefore, it is recommended that Harir Nama, chanting of the holy name of God, and pleasing the Vaishnava are the only means to elevate oneself to spiritual life. Hare Krishna. So you should invite the Brahmanas to your house and feed them sumptuously and chant Hare Krishna. Nice. Everything in Krishna consciousness is actually wonderful. It's full of joy and a lot of nice prasadam. Okay, Canto 3, Chapter 16, verse number 9. It says, I am the master of my unobstructed internal energy, and the water of the Ganges is the remnant left after my feet are washed. That water sanctifies the three worlds, along with Lord Shiva, who bears it on his head. If I can take the dust of the feet of the Vaishnava on my head, who will refuse to do the same? And in the purport, it says the difference between the internal and external energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is that in the internal energy, or in the spiritual world, all the opulences are undisturbed, whereas in the external or material energy, all the opulences are temporary manifestations. The Lord's supremacy is equal in both the spiritual and material worlds. But the spiritual world is called the kingdom of God, and the material world is called the kingdom of Maya. Maya refers to that which is not actually fact. The opulence of the material world is a reflection. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that this material world is just like a tree whose roots are up and branches down. This means that the material world is the shadow of the spiritual world. Real opulence is in the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, the predominating deity is the Lord himself. Whereas in the material world, there are many lords with small l rather than a capital L. That is the difference between the internal and external energies. The Lord says that although he is the predominating factor of the internal energy, and although the material world is sanctified just by the water that has washed his feet, he has the greatest respect for the Brahmanas and the Vaishnava, for the Brahmana and the Vaishnava. When the Lord himself offers so much respect to the Vaishnava and the Brahmana, how can one deny such respect to such personalities? Okay, so follow the leader. If Krishna is showing uh, exceptional respect to genuine Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, well, that's what we should do also. We shouldn't criticize them, but we should offer them very nice place to sit, some glass of water, and very nice prasadam to their full satisfaction. So whatever we see in the material world, it's a reflection of what's in the spiritual world. And actually, it's a perverted reflection of what we see in the spiritual world. So what does that mean? So That means that uh, everything we're seeing in the material world is not a complete, let's say, uh, replica of what's in the spiritual world. It's a, let's say, upside down reflection of what's in the spiritual world. The spiritual world, everything's perfect. In the material world, uh, nothing is perfect. Uh, there's always going to be some discrepancies with things in the material world. Why? Because the atmosphere in the material world is not conducive to pure love and devotion to Krishna. That can only be, you can only see the pure love and devotion to Krishna in pure devotees. But most of the people you meet in the material world are not pure devotees. And many of those people, like 98, 99% of the people in the world, are engaged in illicit activities. So uh, to recognize a pure devotee, the only way to do that is to see what they are saying and how they are living. And if they're living and same time always talking about Krishna, if they're living according to the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, you have a pretty good uh, chance of considering them a pure devotee. So Prabhupada was asked about, are there any pure devotees in your movement? And Prabhupada said, all my devotees are pure. Yeah, and that in a sense that's true because the devotees are following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness and chanting Hare Krishna, which is the Yuga Dharma. The chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the Yuga Dharma. What does that mean? Well, Dharma means the uh, recommended, let's say, behavior, recommended way to worship the Lord. And Yuga means this particular time. So the recommended way to please the Lord in this age is to chant Hare Krishna and take prasadam to your satisfaction and preach. So that's basically what devotees do. They have nice prasadam, they preach, and they chant Hare Krishna. And if they do that, all sincerity and the pure heart, many other people also begin to do that. I was like really surprised yesterday. There's so many people that came up and were talking with me, and you know, uh, uh, there were a couple ladies who started crying, and not because they were suffering, but they just were happy to be in the temple and seeing all the devotees and seeing all the program that was going on, the chanting, the beautiful deities, and then of course also hearing the lecture, and then getting a chance to talk with me, and in that way they were just happy. They were just like overwhelmed by the whole atmosphere. So that's what preaches better than words, the atmosphere in the temple. When they come to the temple, they see a whole bunch of devotees happily chanting and cooperating with each other, and there's no arguing going on. And they get nice prasadam, and they're treated with respect. And it's sometimes it's very overwhelming for people because in the material world, it's all competition. Everyone's competing with each other. But when people see a large number of devotees all cooperating, there's no arguing, and everyone's happy and chanting, it makes a real impression on them. So what is more, let's say, uh, significant in helping someone to become a devotee is to see a large group of devotees all cooperating with each other, all happy, and especially the children are happy, the women are happy, and the men are happy, and the deities are beautiful and beautifully decorated. By the way, Prabhupada said the more you decorate the deities, the more you uh, develop attachment and love for them. So when that's going on, it really affects people. They realize, wow, this is something I don't see normally and experience normally, and I like it, and I'm going to come back again, and maybe I might even become a devotee. So people are judging devotees by their behavior. So they come and they watch and they hear, and if they don't see anything bad and they don't hear anything bad, and then they become convinced, oh, these are the people that I want to associate with. So the behavior of devotees is the best preaching uh, that you can do. Preaching is not necessarily what you're saying, but preaching is what you're doing. So if we are genuinely acting like real devotees, people will notice it, and that is preaching. That's preaching without words. It's preaching by actions, and that's very important. Actions are better than just words. Hare Krishna. Okay, so text number 10. The brahmanas, the cows, and the defenseless creatures are my own body. Those whose faculty of judgment has been impaired means uh, broken or destroyed or in some way not functioning properly. So the faculty of judgment has been impaired by their own sin. Look upon these as distinct from me. They are just like furious serpents, and they are angrily torn apart by the bills of the vulture-like messengers of Yamaraj, the superintendent of sinful persons. Ah, this is a very, let's say, serious verse that's giving uh, a, uh, a warning. Uh, there's a saying in Latin that um, I forget the words, but the meaning is the buyer beware. So when you uh, when you're a devotee, but you don't act like a devotee, that becomes really serious because people get frustrated and angry when they see that. Okay, so the purport says the defenseless creatures, according to Brahma Samhita, are the cows, brahmanas, women, children, and old men. Of these five, the brahmanas and cows are especially mentioned in this verse because the Lord is always anxious about the benefit of the brahmanas and the cows and is prayed to in this way. Well, now you know why I always bring Ram Das to the temple, and comes inside and sits down, and the kids and other people pet him. Why? Because what does it say here? The defenseless creatures, according to Brahma Samhita, are the cows, brahmanas, women, children, and old men. Of these five, the brahmanas and cows are especially mentioned in this verse because the Lord is always anxious about the benefit of the brahmanas and the cows and is prayed to in this way. So now we see how important cows are, and they're just important as the brahmanas. The Lord especially instructs, therefore, that no one should be envious of these five, especially the cows and the brahmanas. In some of the Bhagavatam readings, the word duhitri is used instead of duhati, but in either case, the meaning is the same. Duhati means cow, and duhitri can also be used to mean cow, because the cow is supposed to be the daughter of the sun god. Just as children are taken care of by their parents, women as a class should be taken care of by the father, husband, or grown up son. Those who are helpless must be taken care of by their respective guardians. Otherwise, the guardians will be subjected to punishment of Yamaraj, who is appointed by the Lord to supervise the activities of uh, sinful living creatures. The assistants or messengers of Yamaraj are likened here to vultures. And those who do not execute their respective duties in protecting their wards are compared to serpents. So wards means the people that depend on others. Vultures deal very seriously with serpents, and similarly, the messengers will deal very seriously with neglectful guardians. So, who are the neglectful guardians? Those are people who do not protect uh, women and cows and elderly persons and brahmanas like that, and especially the brahmanas and the cows. So, uh, so it's women, children, and old men, brahmanas, and cows. Of these five, the brahmanas and cows are especially mentioned in this verse because the Lord is always anxious about the benefit of the brahmanas and the cows and is prayed to in this way. So, Krishna, he's the very interested in the brahmanas and the cows, and everyone, but especially in the brahmanas and the cows, that they should be given full respect and fed nicely, and always, let's say, dealt with gently, not with any harshness. So we see Ramdas. He doesn't bother anyone. He doesn't, he's not angry, and he's a very friendly cow. And it's very important that we bring him to the temple and let people pet him and see him. Uh, and then there are the brahmanas. The brahmanas also should be given full respect. They're performing so many sacrificial performances and preaching and always serving prasadam and eating prasadam also. So they should be given full respect also. So everyone, even the ant, should be respected. And how do you respect an ant? Well, you can take a little bit of sugar and put it in the path of the ant, and you go like this: Hare Krishna. So the ant can also become blessed. Not difficult, very easy, and the ants will appreciate it. Okay, so it says that those whose faculty of judgment has been impaired, in other words, uh, destroyed basically, by their own sin, look upon these, meaning uh, defenseless creatures like cows and brahmanas, as distinct from me. In other words, uh, we should treat the brahmanas and the cows in the same way we treat uh, Krishna and the deity, with full respect. Here it says, those whose faculty of judgment has been impaired, in other words, people whose ability to judge things has been, let's say, seriously uh, destroyed by their own sin, look upon these, meaning brahmanas and cows, as distinct from me, as being different from Krishna. They're just like furious serpents. A furious serpent is like a very dangerous uh, snake or a very dangerous uh, lion uh, or a very dangerous animal. And they are angrily torn apart by the bills of the vulture-like messengers of Yamaraj. So Yamaraj's servants, the Yamadutas, when you see them, it looks like they're a vulture that has very sharp teeth and angry eyes, and they're just ready to tear a person apart. And the Yamaraj is they are these servants of Yamaraj, the Yamadutas. They will be, and they look like vultures, and they help Yamaraj punish sinful persons. Yamaraj is the superintendent of sinful persons. So that's a person you don't really want to meet. And the way to avoid meeting him is to follow all the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. Because when you meet Yamaraj, he's not playing games. He's real serious. He's a devotee, but he's got a hard job. He has to punish all the sinful people. Okay. Now there are something called defenseless creatures. And according to Brahma Samhita, the defenseless creatures are cows, brahmanas, women, children, and old men. And of these five, the brahmanas and cows are especially mentioned in this verse because the Lord is always anxious about the benefit of the brahmanas and the cows and is prayed to in this way. So if you see, let's say, a blind person trying to cross a street, they're using their cane to help them. But it's always nice, to say, sir, can I help you cross the street? You take their arm and you walk across the street. Um, so we should, always help people who are not, let's say, able in the normal way to walk across the street, or who are suffering and need help. If we can help them, we should. You know, just like you see these people on the sidewalk, they have a sign and say, "Anything will help. God bless." So uh, I never give money to those people, but I do give them prasadam. You know, prasadam can actually help them. If you give them money and then you hide somewhere and watch what they do with it, they go to a 7-Eleven and buy some beer. So you get some of those, 1/6 of the sinful reaction. But if you give them prasadam and they say, "Oh, thank you," and they eat it, they get benefited and you get benefited. So the best thing is to give prasadam to the so-called mendicants, the people that are begging. Uh, or you can also bring them to the temple to not only have prasadam, but also be able to see the deity. You know. uh, but if you give them money uh, and you're not sure what they're going to do with it, and maybe you're trying to see what they're going to do. If they go straight to the 7-Eleven and buy some beer, you're going to get 1/6 of the sinful reaction. So it's better only to give prasadam. So whenever you go into public places, like for example, let's say you land in Delhi. Well, as soon as you land and get off the airplane and go into the, uh, you know, and go into Delhi, a lot of mendicants, beggars are going to be there. And they're always going to go like this. Even when, as soon as you walk out of the airport, there's a whole bunch of them. So you should always have some prasadam with you, with the expectation that you're going to meet a lot of beggars.
But they refuse to take prasadam and they say, give me money.
I know, but that's their misfortune. No, it's best to give them prasadam. If they want money, then they don't get anything. Yeah, they should be happy. Sometimes they think that prasadam means money. But no, you should always have prasadam to give out, especially in Delhi. Because a lot of beggars right outside, the airport, right outside the door of the, and that's like a business. And then what they do is they train their children to beg. That's even worse. It's even worse. And
Place they have started kidnapping children for these things.
not only that, when a child is born, they specifically break their arms and legs, so they'll be crippled the rest of their life. So the child is on what you would call a skateboard, because they can't walk, and they're begging the rest of their life. Yeah. It's very mean. That's
Big racket.
I know it's terrible, isn't it? Yeah. They purposely uh, break the arms and legs of the child, so the child will be like that the rest of their life, so they can beg. There's It's like unbelievable meanness there's in this world. Okay, so it says here the cow. Uh, hmm, the cow is supposed to be the daughter of the sun god. Whoa. Now that's a different way of looking at the cow. The cow is supposed to be the daughter of the sun god. And just as children are taken care of by the parents, women as a class should be taken care of by the father, husband, or grown up son. Those who are helpless must be taken care of by their respective guardians. Otherwise, the guardians will be subjected to the punishment of Yamaraj, who is appointed by the Lord to supervise the activities of sinful living creatures. The assistants or messengers of Yamaraj are likened here to vultures. Oh, the vulture is the meanest, most vile creature, bird. They're very, very nasty. And they eat dead bodies. That's what they like to eat the most, dead bodies. Are likened to vultures, and those who do not execute their respective duties in protecting their wards. The wards means people who are dependent uh, and need help, are compared to serpents. Vultures deal very seriously with serpents, and similarly, the messengers will deal very seriously with neglectful guardians. So, a mother or father that don't take care of their children, or teachers or guardians that don't care of the children, they're going to be severely punished by Yamaraj, who sends the Yamadutas who are like vultures. Vultures are the worst type of bird. They prey on other other birds or all kinds of different people. I mean, even people or like snakes, especially, and they eat them. So, so the assistants or messengers of Yamaraj are likened here to vultures, and those who do not execute their respective duties in protecting their wards or protecting the people, the elderly people or children who are need to be helped and protected. So they who do not execute their respective duties in protecting their wards are compared to serpents. Vultures deal very seriously with serpents, and similarly, the messengers will deal very seriously with neglectful guardians. These are the people who are supposed to protect children, like parents or like guardians of children. If they don't protect and the children get hurt, then they're going to be dealt with by the servants of Yamaraj. You really don't want that. Neglectful guardians. Okay, so what time is it? Yeah. So text 11. On the other hand, they captivate my heart, who are gladdened in heart, and who, their lotus faces enlightened by nectarian smiles, respect the Brahmanas, even though the Brahmanas utter harsh words. They look upon the Brahmanas as my own self and pacify them by praising them in loving words, even as a son would appease an angry father, or as I am pacifying you. Purport. It has been observed in many instances in the Vedic scriptures that when the Brahmanas or Vaishnavas curse someone in an angry mood, the person who is cursed does not take it upon himself to treat the Brahmanas or the Vaishnavas in the same way. In other words, counter cursing. There are many examples of this. For instance, the sons of Kuvera, when cursed by the great sage Narada, did not seek revenge in the same harsh way, but submitted. Here also, when Jaya and Vijay were cursed by the four Kumaras, they did not become harsh towards them. Rather, they submitted. That should be the way of treating Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. One may sometimes be faced with a grievous situation created by a Brahmana, but instead of meeting him with a similar mood, one should try to pacify him with a smiling face and mild treatment. Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Well, on that point, I'm going to stop right there. On that point is important. And Prabhupada would always instruct his devotees. And he said, if there's a devotee that's not following the regulative principles, you should try and rectify them with kind words and gentle behavior. Not go out there and say, you're a rascal, you're a nonsense, you don't deserve to be a devotee. You don't want to do that. Yeah, he said, gently try and instruct them to do the right thing. So that gentle way is important. We should not be angry, but we should be gentle with people, not hurt their feelings or insult them or call them rascals, nonsense, and so forth. Nobody likes to be called a rascal and nonsense. Although sometimes Prabhupada did say to some devotees that you're a rascal. But that's all right because Prabhupada was able to do that because of his stature as a pure devotee. But we should not speak like that because we'll just make enemies, that's all. It's good not to have any enemies in life. Sometimes you make an enemy thinking, well, he can't do anything to me. But then there's situations in which that enemy can do things to you, because you made him into an enemy. So it's very important. Just like, why are we going out and feeding so many people prasadam? And a lot of those people are dangerous. Not a lot, but some of them are dangerous people, criminals that have just gotten out of jail and they're happy to get a free meal, things like that. Well, it's because you can never tell who you will come to help in a difficult situation. And those people that you've fed regularly, Mahaprashadam, will be able, out of their appreciation for all the prasadam you've given them, to protect you in a difficult situation. And because we're inevitably going to find ourselves in difficult situations, going out feeding people every day or different days of the week, because there's always crazy people, who are mean and violent. So if you feed those people and with respect, not looking down on them, they notice that and like I remember one time one devotee was serving prasadam, but you could tell that he didn't have any respect at all for the let's call them the bums that came to eat the prasadam. And one of the bums, he refused to take the prasadam.
Really?
Yeah. He wanted to have it, but when he saw the behavior of the devotee, he refused it. And that's bad. That's really, really bad. So we have to always offer with love and devotion to people, not with disdain and looking at them as if they're really low-class bums. They might be low-class bums, but we should treat them with respect. Yeah. So that one, so-called low-class bum, he refused when he saw the behavior of the devotee. He refused to take prasada. Okay. So Brahmanas and Vaishnavas should be accepted as earthly representatives of Narayana. Okay, we're not on that. Okay, text 11.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they captivate my heart, who are gladdened in heart, and who, their lotus faces enlightened by nectarian smiles, respect the Brahmanas, even though the Brahmanas utter harsh words. They look upon the Brahmanas as my own self and pacify them by praising them in loving words, even as a son would appease an angry father, or as I am pacifying, you. Purport. It has been observed in many instances in the Vedic scriptures that when the Brahmanas or Vaishnavas curse someone in an angry mood, the person who is cursed does not take it upon himself to treat the Brahmanas or Vaishnavas in the same way. There are many examples for this. For instance, the sons of Kuvera, when cursed by the great sage Narada, did not seek revenge in the same harsh way, but submitted. Here also, when Jaya and Vijay were cursed by the four Kumaras, they did not become harsh towards them. Rather, they submitted. That should be the way of treating Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. One may sometimes be faced with a grievous situation created by a Brahmana, but instead of meeting him with a similar mood, one should try to pacify him with a smiling face and mild treatment. Brahmanas and Vaishnavas should be accepted as earthly representatives of Narayana. Nowadays, some foolish persons have manufactured the term Daridra Narayana, the poor Narayana, right? There's no such thing as poor Narayana, indicating that the poor man should be accepted as the representative of Narayana. But in Vedic literature, we do not find that poor men should be treated as representatives of Narayana. Of course, those who are unprotected are mentioned here, but the definition of this phrase is clear from the Shastra. The poor man should not be unprotected. In other words, one should protect a poor person. But the Brahmana should especially be treated as the representative of Narayana and should be worshipped like him. In other words, this term, Daridra Narayana, means the poor Narayana. And that means that it's like the bum on the street. And they're called poor Narayana. Well, there's no such thing as poor Narayana. Narayana is the most opulent person. So we should help unfortunate people, but we shouldn't make this false, let's say, narrative that poor man is God, that poor man is God, and then therefore you have to give him all respect of God. But we respect the poor people or the unfortunate people with nice prasadam and friendly behavior, and if they're willing, with spiritual knowledge. So this Duridra Narayana was a phrase started by, I think it was, what's his name? Duridra Narayana. Vivekananda. Yeah, he started that. In other words, you should see all poor people, the bum on the street, as Narayana. There's no such thing as Daridya or poor Narayana. Narayana is completely opulent and transcendental, right? But he's trying to say that, oh, this the person on the street, panhandling, he's the Daridya Narayana, poor Narayana. That's ridiculous. Yeah. But we should respect all people, even the person that's panhandling on the street, by having prasadam and giving it to them. Don't give them money because they might use the money to buy wine and liquor, and then you get 1/6 of the sinful reaction.
The name was coined by Vivekananda, but popularized by Mahatma Gandhi.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Maharaj, his philosophy is Swami Vivekananda, Daridra Narayana is an axiom.
Is it what? Is it what?
Axiom,
Axiom? How do you spell it?
AXIOM,
Okay.
axiom, by the late 19th century Indian sage Swami Vivekananda, espousing that service to the poor is equivalent in importance and piety to
Serving
service to
God.
God.
Yeah. Yes. Now, some people argue that if you don't accept what Vivekananda said, that means you're not really you're not really a sadhu, right? But the point is that when Vivekananda was saying Duryodhana Narayana, he's saying this the poor God, but God is not poor. They're poor people, but God is not poor. But he was trying to equate the poor people as God, and that was why it was rejected by Vaishnavas, that term Durja Narayana. Narayana is not Durja; it's not a poor man. He's the supreme personality of Godhead. So that was just this. It's called rubber stamping. Look that word up, rubber stamping. They rubber stamp a person who's like a very like maybe they're a drunkard or something, and as if they're actually a sacred person. What does it say? Rubber stamp.
Approve automatically without proper consideration.
Well, say that again.
Approve automatically without proper consideration.
A proof.
Approve.
Yeah.
Approve.
Approve.
Approve
automatically.
Yeah.
Approve automatically without proper consideration.
Yeah, but if you call, people that are begging on the street, Daridya Narayana, putting them on the same same level as Narayana, but they could be, really horrible people. So it's a false, what do you call that? False moniker. Look up that word moniker, MON something. Yeah, what does that say? Moniker. A false way of addressing someone. Yes.
I think it's a name.
Nickname or pet name?
Yeah, his real name is Dave Kennedy. It's a nickname for somebody, I think.
Moniker.
Yeah, a moniker is a nickname or a pet name for a person.
Okay. So this Dhiridya Narayana is like that, it's like a pet name, but it doesn't really, it's actually the wrong way of identifying that person. Okay, I think we'll stop right there and we'll continue tonight. Are there any questions?
I think Vivekananda's intention was different, Maharaj, but Mahatma Gandhi took it into a different slide. This one, he started calling poor people as Dajra Narayanas.
Yeah.
So that is how it got misguided. The word. But Vivekananda's was to help poor people.
He's
Helping
saying service
poor-
to mankind is service to
Service
God.
to God, Vivekananda. But Gandhi took it to telling poor people as Daridra Narayanas. In
Okay.
that way, it got misguided completely. That's why.
Yeah.
Then Vaishnavas started opposing that.
Right.
But
Well-
service to mankind is also not to service to God, right, Maharaj?
Yeah. Manava Seva, Madhava Seva. So it's the other way. Madhava Seva is Manava Seva. By serving God, you also serve people. It's not by serving the people that you serve God
So
necessarily.
in almost all the Indian temples, they serve prasadam in the temple. And free meals. Free meals will be there in almost all South Indian temples. Almost free meals are offered. Almost.
Yeah, but that's right understood, which is offered to the Lord.
Yeah,
worship
they
the Lord,
offer to
and
the
then
Lord and
and
they
then
serve
give that as a prasadam.
prasadam.
That is fine.
That's
But these other people, they reject the deity worship,
deity worship and
and then they only want to serve the man. Mankind.
Okay, well, who are those?
Some of
Yeah.
the people who reject the deity worship, like even I think Hari Samaj is like that.
Arya Samaj, yes.
So it's more about the social
Oh,
welfare.
Arya Hodgepodge. Yeah. They reject deity worship
Yeah.
completely. That means they're atheists. Okay, so
One
let's,
question on that.
yes.
The verses we mentioned the Brahmanas. Is the Vaishnava word came later
Where are you reading from?
in the text 11 as well as in previous one.
The actual verses refer to Brahmana.
House. Yeah. And we have a clear definition of between the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. And here in these verses,
Yeah, but
Krishna
I think in the
mentioned
previous verse, Prabhupada says the Brahmana, Brahmajanati, the Brahmana. The Brahmana only knows up to Brahman realization, whereas the Vaishnava realizes all three.
the English mind, this kind of argument can be brought.
So here it says, the person who is cursed does not take it upon himself to treat the Brahmanas or the Vaishnavas in the same way. Is that what you're talking about?
Prabhupada mentions interchangeably these words in the purports,
Uh-huh.
but in the main
Brahmanas and Vaishnavas?
yeah. In the
But in the
verse,
actual Sanskrit verses, it's only referring to Brahmana.
Brahmanas. Yeah. It's like Vaishnava word came later, something like that, or is there a history of this?
So, okay, in the verse, it says, Ye Brahmanan, Maidya, Shipato, so forth. So, it just says Brahmanas. It doesn't say Vaishnavas. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like is
So
there
his question is like the Vaishnava word point later.
Well, that's why we read purports, to understand the real meaning of the verse, right? If you don't read the purport, then it's very easy to make mistakes about what the verse is saying.
Yeah, like by default, ordinary people take Brahmana as somebody who has branded as Brahmana.
Yeah.
They take them granted as Brahmana. They serve them.
Well, yes. I mean, without reading the purport, you'll never really completely understand what the verse is talking about. And so, but that's why there's a purport. There are people, even in ISKCON, they never read the purports, they just read the verses.
And I started my journey with more on the verses first, Maharaj.
Yeah.
And later I seen the Prabhupada talks the overall vision.
Yeah.
Then when I read more and more and more, okay, then all seems to make sense. But it took a quite bit of time reading, understanding before I started accepting Prabhupada's words.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
That the people have a faith in the scriptures, but when it comes to the purpose,
No, because there is always
the background.
the point that people who translate can give their own opinion, which is true.
Mhm.
But in this case, Prabhupada, even though when he intentionally translates certain words,
Yeah.
there is a basis on which he translates. If you see in totality, then you will see that, for example, in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada translates, let's say, even Karma Yoga as or Buddhi Yoga as Bhakti in the very third chapter itself. So, what most people might say, oh no, but
Buddhi yoga is not bhakti yoga.
not Bhakti Yoga. But then if you see eventually what Krishna said towards the end and what Arjuna accepted, that means like Buddhi Yoga means
Bhakti. Yeah.
But it takes some time for people to really get to
Understand.
understand.
Yeah. Well, that's why you have to read the purports. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We will.
Any other questions or comments on it? Yeah. Yes, go ahead, Mataji. Yes. You can unmute.
Is a acharya or a mahatma or a pure devotee, which one is considered to be perfect, and are all devotees mahatmas?
Well, let's look at the word Mahatma. It means a great person on the level of pure devotee, because they have knowledge and practice. So, what is your question again?
So I wanted to know, like, is a mahatma considered to be perfect, or is an acharya considered to be perfect? Because I know, like, they say, like, out of 100 devotees, there's usually like only one in that bunch that has like no desires. That's considered to be pure. And
Pure.
I just, yeah. And I wanted to know, like, what is perfect? Like a Mahatma or a Acharya or a pure devotee? Like, which one is perfect?
Okay, let's not look at the words. Let's just look at the actions. A person who is always chanting Hare Krishna, following the rules and regulations, is always kind and gentle, and has no, let's say, reprehensible behavior. That's a real Mahatma, great devotee. And you can only judge by the behavior, not by the name. Mahatma means, a great personality. Mahat is a great personality who has knowledge of the Vedas. So, but you can only judge that by their behavior. You can't rubber stamp a person, Mahatma. Just like you don't name a blind child, oh, beautiful eyed one. You can't rubber stamp a Mahatma. Mahatma can only be recognized by their excellent behavior as a devotee. So when they were using the word Mahatma Gandhi, so he was not really a Mahatma. Why? Well, he caused the death of so many people by his cowardice and not actually following Krishna consciousness. He looked like, the British, they defined Mahatma Gandhi in this way. And he said, amongst the sadhus, he's a politician, and amongst the politicians, he's a sadhu. So I mean, the British, they exactly defined who Mahatma Gandhi was, but they're calling him Mahatma, a great personality. But he caused the death of a lot of people. You know, he didn't kill them himself, but the way he was interpreting what is the right thing to do was wrong, and it caused the death of a lot of people. You know, that's why he was assassinated, because finally one man, one Hindu gentleman, became really frustrated with what he was doing, so he went and killed him. You know? So the man who was preaching nonviolence, Mahatma Gandhi, was murdered because he was not really Mahatma. He was not actually a great, let's say, devotee. He was acting like a great devotee, but he was pretending to be a great devotee, but he was not acting like a great devotee. And because of him, a lot of people died. You know, he didn't. He was basically a coward, and he could not act properly with the Muslims, and the Muslims had no respect for him at all. You know, because they realized he was a hodgepodge person. You know, in other words, he was. They 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 became convinced that Mahatma was not really a person that had respect for the Muslims. That was in the 1920s. So when there was the partition in 1940s, Mahatma Gandhi was not able to stop it, and the Muslims in the 1920s, Mahatma Gandhi did certain things that convinced the Muslims that he was not actually a great person, and he was not a person that they could trust. So when you get to the 1940s, when there was this partition and things like that, Mahatma Gandhi couldn't stop it. He couldn't make it so that India would not be divided like that, because he himself was not, let's say, fixed up in Krishna consciousness. Although he had the name, and he was named Mahatma, he's a great devotee of the Lord. So that was a wrong definition of who he was. It was like more like in some ways, it looked like he was a Mahatma, because he would be fasting a lot and would be preaching about nonviolence, but his behavior just caused the death of almost 1 million people. So, you know, how can you call him a Mahatma? You know, and he himself got very frustrated, and he was murdered by a Hindu who, yeah, he developed. Uh, anyway, the Muslims realized that Gandhi didn't know what he was doing, and they lost respect for him. And then a Hindu killed him. That's what happens when you deviate from what you're supposed to be. You know, they realize it's not really a Mahatma. Yeah.
Krishna himself defines what Mahatma is, right? In the seventh chapter.
Yeah. It
92
says
of
one
Nam
who is always engrossed in thinking of him or saying his names, he's Mahatma.
All right.
His purport.
Yeah. By the way, Gandhi didn't really believe there was.
Yeah, but by
He
that
talked about him.
definition,
He talked about him sometimes, but he didn't really believe in Krishna as a supreme personality. Got it.
Hmm.
So how can he be a Mahatma then?
yeah, that is Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma.
Yeah, you have to believe that Krishna is a supreme personality. Got it. Otherwise, you're not a Mahatma.
Okay, so only the great personalities, not all.
Mahatma.
Yeah.
Mahatma is a very, very exalted, let's say, position that it's only given to, well, it should only be given to people who are strictly pure devotees. You can't, you know, just rubber stamp someone. This guy's a Mahatma. They have to have impeccable behavior of a devotee to get that name. It's Mahatma. So
Okay.
Gandhi was not impeccable in all his behavior. He made a lot of mistakes and he caused the death of a lot of people. Not that he killed them, but the decisions that he made caused the death of a lot of people. So he had the wrong name, Mahatma Gandhi. He should just been satisfied with Gandhi. That's the problem. People misidentify people, other people, and sort of give them an inflated, let's say, image, and innocent people follow such persons that are supposed to be pure devotees, but they're not actually pure devotees. Gandhi was not a pure devotee. He was someone that was in mixed mode of goodness and passion, and sometimes ignorance. And why? Well, number one, he was a coward. He didn't. He was not. He was afraid of standing up to the Muslims, and because of that, the Muslims, realized that they could not. They didn't have to really listen to what he was saying because he had no. His whole idea of nonviolence meant that he wouldn't do anything if it broke away from India. And that's because he was always talking about nonviolence, right? But sometimes violence is necessary. If someone's choking your wife and you say, "Oh well, please don't do that," that's not a nice thing to do. That's not what you do. You have to be violent to stop that person.
Right there is the example of the country was getting partitioned. Muslim people obviously took advantage of his
Weakness.
Yeah, but still he didn't. He wanted the.
No, he went there. He went there and prayed. Please stop this. The Muslims just, they ignored him. And they realized
Violent
Hmm.
partition,
Millions.
yeah, because of him.
raped, and children were defiled. It was horrible.
Whole bogey of a train.
That's what happens when you have a person who's not really a bona fide, Mahatma. On this way, you can sort of, give, credit to Modi because, he was not afraid to kill people that were misbehaving, and and eventually became the president of the whole country, prime minister of the whole country. Although he did things that you would call that you would think are not right, like when the Muslims attacked this train. Yes, so then he gave 2 days freedom for the Hindus to go and kill Muslims, and they killed a lot of Muslims in 2 days, and then he stopped it. But he gave the signal, okay, you guys can take revenge, So then people realize, you don't mess around with Modi because, he's a serious leader, Whereas Gandhi, he was just a wimp, talking about nonviolence. But sometimes you have to be violent, not indiscriminately, but when there's a genuine need to protect people, you have to be violent. Haribo. All glories to Prabhupada. Ki jai.
Any other questions? Okay, so we will end the session and we'll see you in the
Haribo. All glories to Prabhupada.